The bank of banks, savior of markets, builder of empires, lender of last resort when no one else could. Today, J.P. Morgan moves over $10 trillion every single day across the globe. But here's the question. How did one bank rise so high that even nations can't move money without it? Stop what you're doing, let's get into it now. Before J.P. Morgan became the bank of banks, it was the bank of industry. In the late 1800s, America was exploding with railroads, steel, and oil, but growth needed money, big money. Enter J. Pierpont Morgan, a man with a nose for power and a face as cold as the coins he moved. Morgan didn't just finance companies, he built empires, railroads that connected the nation, steel that created cities, capital that fueled America's rise to world power. But the real legend began in 1907. The U.S. banking system was weak, no Federal Reserve, no lender of last resort. When panic hit, chaos ruled. Banks collapsed, depositors ran, markets spiraled, the U.S. economy teetered on the edge of collapse. And then one man stepped in. Not the president, not Congress, not any government institution. It was J.P. Morgan himself. In a dark library, Morgan locked the nation's most powerful bankers inside and refused to let them leave until a rescue plan was signed. Overnight, he pulled together enough capital to stop the panic. The result? Morgan wasn't just the banker. He was the savior of the U.S. economy. But his power terrified Washington, because in 1907, one truth became clear. America didn't have a central bank, but it didn't need one. It already had J.P. Morgan. That shockwave led directly to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, a permanent central bank built because one private banker was too powerful to fail. And yet, even after the Fed was born, Morgan's empire didn't fade. It grew, stronger, richer, deeper into the veins of global finance. The question wasn't whether America needed Morgan anymore. It was whether the world itself could move money without him. The depression that killed banks, but not Morgan. October 1929. Wall Street crashes. Trillions in today's dollars evaporate overnight. Thousands of banks buckle. Businesses die. Families lose homes, jobs, hope. The Great Depression begins. And yet, one name stands tall. J.P. Morgan. Why? Because Morgan was built different. While others chased reckless bets, Morgan kept a conservative fortress balance sheet. His clients weren't everyday farmers with $10. They were the Rockefellers, the Vanderbilts, the titans of industry. Even as panic swallowed Main Street, the Morgan name meant safety, prestige, survival. But not without change. In 1933, the U.S. passed the Glass-Steagall Act, forcing Morgan to split. Investment banking on one side, commercial banking on the other. Most banks would have crumbled under that shock. Morgan? He adapted. J.P. Morgan & Co. remained the crown jewel of finance. Morgan Stanley was born, a Wall Street powerhouse in its own right. It was as if the Depression tried to kill Morgan, but instead, it multiplied him. Other banks collapsed into history books. Morgan became the history book. But Morgan wasn't just surviving. In crises, it became something more. A savior, a rescuer, a lender when no one else could. And that role would shape entire nations. The savior of economies. 1907, the panic. The U.S. financial system is seconds away from total collapse. Banks closing, credit frozen, fear everywhere. The President of the United States, helpless. Congress, deadlocked. The Federal Reserve didn't even exist yet. And then one man steps in. Not a president, not a government, J.P. Morgan. He locks the nation's most powerful bankers inside his library and orders them to pool money and by sheer will stabilizes the entire system. This wasn't charity, it was survival for the markets, for America, for the empire of Morgan himself. That night proved a brutal truth. When governments freeze, Morgan moves. Fast forward, World War I. Who finances Allied powers buying weapons? Morgan. The Great Depression. Who still had enough credibility to back deals? Morgan. Modern financial shocks, sovereign defaults, corporate meltdowns, trade crises. Again and again, the hand on the lever is Morgan's.
Why Morgan is called the savior of economies? Because when no one else could provide liquidity, Morgan did. When no one else could move billions across borders overnight, Morgan did. When entire markets needed trust, Morgan's name delivered it. Money arteries glowing across the globe, red to J.P. Morgan's logo pulsing like a beating heart. But saving economies was just the beginning. Morgan wasn't just any bank. It became the Bank of Banks. And that title came with powers even the World Bank can't touch. The Bank of Banks, power beyond nations. What does it mean to be the Bank of Banks? It means when ordinary banks fail, you are the one they call. When governments can't raise money fast enough, you provide it. And when the global system shakes, you don't just survive, you decide who gets saved. That's why J.P. Morgan earned the title, the Bank of Banks. Here's the truth no one talks about. The World Bank, powerful, yes, funds development. Roads, dams, schools, but that's slow money, long-term loans, future-focused. J.P. Morgan, different game. It handles the now, the crisis that can't wait until tomorrow, the billion-dollar trade that must settle today, the sovereign bond that needs backing before a government defaults tonight. Think about it. Every single day, J.P. Morgan moves over $10 trillion. That's more than the GDP of Japan or Germany, flowing through its systems every 24 hours. No aid package, no UN committee, no World Bank boardroom moves money at that speed. World Bank, $100 billion in total lending capacity. JP Morgan, $10 trillion per day. That's not a bank. That's a global circulatory system, an invisible financial central nervous system. And here's the shocking part. This isn't just history. Right now, in 2025, every continent, every major trade, every sovereign debt deal runs into one question. Can this happen without JP Morgan? The answer will blow your mind. JP Morgan's global influence today. Here's the number that should stop you in your tracks. $10 trillion. That's how much JP Morgan moves every single day. That's more than the economies of France or the UK, moving daily, silently through JPM's digital veins. But let's break it down. Trade finance. When two nations trade, oil from Saudi Arabia, microchips from Taiwan, someone has to guarantee the money clears. That's trade finance. And while Citi and HSBC fight for the crown, JP Morgan sits close behind, ready to strike. Because here's the trick. If Citi or HSBC falter, guess who steps in to carry the weight? JP, the fallback, the one no one questions. Investment banking wars. Goldman Sachs is flashy, Citi is everywhere, Bank of America is massive, but JP Morgan, it's the one they all measure against. Deals worth billions, IPOs that create overnight giants, sovereign loans that decide if a country sinks or floats. 9 times out of 10, JP Morgan is either leading or silently orchestrating behind the scenes. Nations and continents. Here's the billion-dollar question. Can serious financial decisions happen without JP Morgan? Politically? Sure. A president can declare, a parliament can vote. But financially? When it comes to moving the actual money, raising the funds, legitimizing the bond, clearing the trade, without JP Morgan's networks, it's like trying to run electricity without wires. And this is the quiet truth. JP Morgan is no longer just America's bank. It's the world's financial switchboard, a shadow central bank that nations don't admit they depend on, but secretly can't live without. The twist or revelation. We've seen how JP Morgan survived crashes. We've seen how it saved economies. We've seen how it moves $10 trillion every single day. But here's the revelation nobody wants to admit. The Federal Reserve prints the dollars, but JP Morgan controls the pipes, the liquidity streams, the arteries that pump money into every corner of the globe. Without the Fed, there's no money. But without JP Morgan, there's no movement. And without movement, money is dead. Think about it. The World Bank talks about building futures. The IMF negotiates policies. Governments make speeches. But when ships must sail today, when debts must be paid tonight, when a market teeters on collapse and the whole system needs a lifeline, it's JP Morgan that flips the switch. It's JP Morgan that breathes oxygen back into the system. JP Morgan is not just the bank. It is the shadow central bank of the world. And the terrifying truth? Every time a crisis hits, nations don't just look to their governments or central banks. They look quietly, desperately to JP Morgan. Because since 1907, every crash, every panic, every meltdown has whispered the same question. When nations stumble, who saves the system? And too often, the answer has been the same. JP Morgan, the bank behind the curtain. From the chaos of the Great Depression, to saving industries in wartime, to absorbing Wall Street's failures in 2008, to keeping trade alive during COVID, JP Morgan has stood not just as a bank, but as the last line of defense for the global financial system. It survived when others collapsed. It adapted when governments forced change. It rose so high that today, $10 trillion flows through its hands every single day. A bank so vast, so entrenched that even nations can't move money without brushing against its networks. Recount it in one line. Arrow from depression survivor to America's financial savior to the world's financial empire to the shadow central bank of Earth. Every crisis since 1907 has asked the same haunting question. When nations stumble, who saves the system? And time and again, the answer has been the same. JP Morgan. Who holds the lever? Global money arteries, animation, trillions flowing through pipelines labeled with JPM. Cut to world leaders, then JPM towers in New York, London, Hong Kong. Fade to host voiceover with a dark, cinematic tone. So the next time you hear about a financial crisis, a market crash, or a nation running out of money, ask yourself, whose hand is really on the lever? Because while the World Bank talks policy and the Fed prints dollars, JP Morgan is out there every single day moving the currents that keep the system alive. They don't just bank money, they bank power. And that power flows through all of us, whether we see it or not. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, don't just stop here. Hit subscribe right now and dive into our playlist on the hidden powers of global finance. Because at Power Currents, we don't just report money news, we expose the currents of power shaping your future and the world.